Hey everyone, my name is Amelia Brown and welcome to my very first episode of Breaking It Down with Amelia Brown, where I research current events and delve more into stories than simply taking face value. I will present my research to you all, showing how I've arrived at my conclusions, and will hopefully leave you feeling more informed and inspired to go out and research more topics that are intriguing and important to you. Just to let you guys know, if you see this movement, that just means that I'm scrolling down my page. I have a lot of information to share with you guys, and so I wanted to make sure that I'm absolutely clear and articulate about it. So I wrote myself a little script, Gotta do what you gotta do. Anyway, because I will be expressing and explaining my own opinions, I will be inherently biased. However, I assure you that the statements I make will be supported by factual evidence. If you find a flaw in my research or a counter-argument, feel free to leave a comment. I am by no means perfect, so I welcome different productive perspectives. Let's begin with today's topic. It would be impossible to discuss any other news, in my opinion, than the current Black Lives Matter movement, where protests sparked all over the country in response to the murders of Delron Small, Philando Castile, and Alton Sterling, as well as the tragic murders of 5 police officers in Dallas. In the wake of after what occurred in Dallas, people are pointing fingers at each other, blaming each other for one man's act of senseless violence. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Texas Republican Congressman Roger Williams have both made statements that partially blame Black Lives Matter for what happened. And so today I'm going to attempt to answer the simple question, what is Black Lives Matter? A lot of people have heard, seen, or read about it. It has influenced this upcoming election and has reignited the conversation about America and race, particularly in terms of police brutality. Now, when I use the terms police brutality, I mean the use of any force exceeding that reasonably necessary to accomplish a lawful police purpose. I want to take a minute here to pause and reflect on the fact that I'm speaking from a place of privilege, especially in terms of police brutality. I don't have to worry about being shot by the police, or my brothers being shot by the police, where that is very much a fear for people of color. I am in a place of privilege where I can speak about police brutality from a distance, and as an ally, I felt the utmost responsibility to acknowledge that before I continue. Now that that's cleared up, let's move on. The number one place that I looked to find what Black Lives Matter is, and the number one place you should look as well, is simply blacklivesmatter.com. There are a ton of opinions on what Black Lives Matter does and doesn't stand for, but no one says it better than the 3 founders who started it all. Patrisse Cullors, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi are the 3 women responsible for creating the hashtag. Garza wrote an open letter back in 2012 when George Zimmerman was acquitted of killing Trayvon Martin. She concluded the letter by saying the now nationally known phrase, Black Lives Matter, and the hashtag took off. What began as a social media declaration became a movement of action in 2014, when Michael Brown was killed by police officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri, and Eric Gardner was killed in New York City. Some would call them rioters, others call them protesters, but as stated on their website, Black Lives Matter is not a moment, but a movement. They are here to stay, to be known, and to make a real political change. Black Lives Matter is decentralized. There is no president, no exec board, no one person calling all the shots. Instead, there are 38 chapters across the country, including one in Toronto, that function and address issues of racism on local levels. Each chapter has their own set of leaders and rules on membership, which you can apply for on the Black Lives Matter website. In a quote from an interview with the Daily Beast, Patrisse Cullors stated, "What we do is support the chapters. We support their local demands and goals. They tell us what they need us to build support around." But what makes Black Lives Matter different than previous movements? To start off, the founders themselves, 2 of which are queer Black women and the other is the daughter of Nigerian immigrants. Black Lives Matter is absolutely adamant about recognizing diversity within the Black community and prioritize having leaders who are not just straight, cisgender Black men, as seen in previous movements such as the Black Panther Party. Their website states, Black Lives Matter affirms the lives of Black queer and trans folks, disabled folks, Black undocumented folks, folks with records, women and all Black lives along the gender spectrum. It centers those who have been marginalized within Black liberation movements. It is a tactic to rebuild the Black liberation movement. Which brings us to why it's called Black Lives Matter. There has been much criticism for the name. After all, don't all lives matter? Don't women's lives matter? Don't Hispanic lives matter? Don't white lives matter? Etc., etc. Yes, of course they do. But that's not the goal of the movement. The name Black Lives Matter represents unity within the Black community, that the rights of a Black trans woman are just as important and should be fought for just as much as the rights of an unarmed straight Black man. It's a movement that acknowledges all walks of life who identify as Black, which is actually a groundbreaking modern approach to inequality. This idea of solidarity while acknowledging intersectionality is how Garza concludes Black Lives Matter's manifesto. She writes, "And perhaps more importantly, when Black people cry out in defense of our lives, which are uniquely, systematically, and savagely targeted by the state, we're asking you, our family, to stand with us in affirming Black lives. Not just all lives, Black lives. Please do not change the conversation by talking about how your life matters too. It does, but we need less watered down unity and a more active solidarities with us, Black people, unwaveringly, in defense of our humanity. Our collective future depends on it." If you don't think that Black people are treated unfairly, let's take a closer look at police brutality. Since January 1st, 2015, the Washington Post has tracked every single fatal police shooting, creating their own database called Fatal Force, which is available online. They examine news reports, public records, social media, and their own original reporting, and have included details such as the victim's name, race, age, the officers involved, and more. Check it out. They've accurately tracked double the shootings the FBI did in 2015. The Washington Post states, according to the most recent census data, there are nearly 160 million more white people in America than there are Black people. White people make up roughly 62% of the U.S. population, but only about 40% of those who are killed by police officers. African Americans, however, account for 24% of those fatally shot and killed by the police, despite being just 13% of the U.S. population. As the Post noted in a new analysis published last week, that means Black Americans are 2.5 times as likely as white Americans to be shot and killed by police officers. And that's for all Black Americans. That likelihood goes up even more if you're a Black man. Fatal Force also doesn't include officers who are off duty, meaning Delron Small's death wasn't even accounted for. So even though technically more white people are killed by the police, Black people are disproportionately killed more given their smaller population within the U.S. That is not to say that all the shootings police have done were unjust. Some of these shootings occurred to save other citizens, to save themselves in real life-threatening situations. The Post analysis is entirely numerically and statistically based, so while it does highlight the real racial unequal likelihood of being shot by the police, it counts the deaths of real criminals versus victims of police brutality as one and the same. But back to the name, Black Lives Matter. Garza does state that all lives matter. She never once expresses hatred towards any other groups. Her message is one that acknowledges the pain and invisibility that Black people often feel, calls for solidarity within that community, and asks for validation and support from the rest of the country to make real change. This message is why someone like Rudy Giuliani, former New York City mayor, accusing Black Lives Matter of being inherently racist doesn't make any sense. Giuliani claims that the group divides us, that it emphasizes racial lines. But emphasizing racial lines is actually the opposite of racism because it exposes unequal treatment. Racism is not seeing color. It's ignoring color. It's ignoring the ways people of different races are treated and acting as if we are all treated the same. For example, why is it that we view the horrific actions of Micah Johnson as if he represents Black Lives Matter, even though he specifically stated that he was upset about Black Lives Matter and he was not affiliated with any groups, when the actions of Dylan Roof, the man who shot and killed 9 Black people in a church in Charleston last year, who wanted to start, quote, a race war, are viewed as an isolated event, separate from the rest of how white people feel. Both of these men are examples of extremism, of hatred, and in this time of racial tensions and distrust, we must educate ourselves. No one wants violence. Protesting is not violent. Proper policing is not unjust, and together we must acknowledge each other's unique experiences in this country if we wish to reach peace. That's all for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to subscribe, share, and comment, especially if there's a topic you'd like me to look into. Thanks for breaking it down with me. See you next week. Bye.